What happens when a late-night host decides the easiest joke of the night is the man sitting right across from him? It took 34 seconds. 34 seconds between one careless line and a live studio audience realizing they weren't watching a promotional interview anymore. They were watching something come apart in real time. This is a fictional story. Every name in it is invented. But the shape of it. A host who reaches for an easy laugh at a guest's expense, and a guest who refuses to simply sit there and take it, is a moment that feels uncomfortably familiar, because some version of it plays out more often than television ever wants to admit. This is the story of Derek Voss and Cole Bratton, a late-night host and an action star with nothing left to prove, and the night one joke cost a host far more than a laugh. The show was Voss Tonight, a late-night program built almost entirely around its host's reputation for sharp, occasionally cutting humor. Derek Voss had built a career on that edge. Audiences tuned in expecting a little bite with their laughs, and for the most part, his guests played along, trading barbs, treating the roast-like banter as part of the ritual. That night's guest was Cole Bratton, an action star in his mid-40s whose career had been built the hard way. Before Hollywood, Cole had grown up with almost nothing, cycling through jobs that had nothing to do with cameras or scripts. He'd fought for every role, done his own stunts long after he could afford not to, and built a production company from the ground up. He didn't come from industry connections. He'd built what he had, one difficult year at a time, and he carried a quiet, unshakable pride about that. A pride that didn't often show itself on camera, because it rarely needed to. He was there that night for one reason: to promote his new film, a project that had taken 2 years and employed hundreds of people to bring to screen. Simple. Routine. The kind of interview stop he'd done 100 times before. The studio lights were hot. The crowd was loud and easy, laughing along with the pre-show warm-up comedian, settling into their seats. Nobody in that building had any idea that in a few minutes, they'd be watching something that had nothing to do with the movie at all. To understand what happened that night, it helps to understand where each man was really coming from. Derek Voss had spent nearly a decade building his particular brand of comedy. Quick, sharp, occasionally cutting, always delivered with a grin that made the harder edges feel like they were still in good fun. It had worked for him. His show had a loyal audience that expected a little friction with their late-night laughs, and most guests, media-trained and camera-savvy, knew how to play along, trading barbs right back at him without anyone ever really getting hurt. Over time, that dynamic had calmed something in Derek, a quiet, unexamined assumption that everyone who sat in that chair understood the rules of the game the same way he did, and would simply roll with whatever he threw at them. Cole Bratton had built his life according to a very different set of rules. He'd grown up without much of anything, bouncing between jobs that had nothing to do with the industry that would eventually make him famous. He'd made real mistakes as a young man, the kind that follow a person, the kind he'd spent years quietly working to repair. By the time Hollywood found him, he'd already learned the hardest lesson there was: that nothing worth having comes without a real cost, paid in full, usually in private, usually without anyone applauding along the way. He carried that history close, rarely mentioning it unless asked directly, not out of shame, but because he'd already done the work of making peace with it, and he didn't feel the need to perform that piece for anyone else's entertainment. Two men. Two very different relationships with the idea of easy. Neither one expecting, walking into that studio, just how directly those two views were about to collide. Cole walked out to applause, shook Derek's hand, and settled into the guest chair with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. "Cole, welcome back," Derek said, flashing his usual grin. "Good to have you." "Good to be here," Cole said. "Excited to talk about the movie. The crew worked incredibly hard on this one." "Oh, we'll get to the movie," Derek said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "But first, I gotta ask, how does it feel being one of the highest-paid action stars in the business? Must be nice. Show up, flex a little, say a few lines, collect the check." The audience laughed, a light, easy laugh, the kind that usually follows this sort of banter. Cole smiled along with it, the way he always did. "I mean, there's a little more to it than that," he said, still smiling. "But sure, it's a good gig." Derek, sensing an opening, kept going. Come on, though. Real talk. Some of us had to work our way up doing this. Actual writing, actual jokes, night after night. Not everyone gets handed movie roles because they've got the right jawline. Something in Cole's expression shifted. Not anger yet, just a flicker of surprise. The audience's laughter thinned slightly, uncertain whether this was still the bit. Handed to me? Cole repeated, his voice even but suddenly sharper at the edges. Derek, you have no idea what it took to get here. Derek, still riding his own momentum, didn't catch the shift. Whoa, someone's a little defensive, he said, playing to the crowd. I'm just saying, it's a pretty easy life compared to some. That was the moment. 34 seconds into the exchange, and this was exactly where the night stopped being a normal interview. Easy? Cole said, sitting forward now, his tone controlled but unmistakably serious. You want to talk about easy? Try training for months, doing your own stunts, working 16-hour days on set, while somebody else sits behind a desk making jokes about it for a living. The audience went quiet. Derek's smile faltered for just a second before he tried to recover it. Hey, it's all jokes, Cole. Relax. I invited. No, you invited me on your show, Cole said. And now you're sitting there telling me I don't deserve what I've built. I've been doing this over 20 years. I've produced films. I've built a company from nothing. And you want to reduce that to a punchline. Derek shifted in his chair, visibly caught off guard. Look, I didn't mean it like. You meant exactly what you said, Cole said, cutting him off. Not shouting, but with a flat, deliberate calm that somehow carried further than a raised voice would have. You thought you'd get an easy laugh at my expense. But I didn't come from connections or a head start. Everything I have, I fought for. The studio had gone completely still. A few audience members shifted in their seats, unsure whether to laugh, stay silent, or do something else entirely. Derek tried once more to steer things back. Okay, let's just get back to the movie. Tell us about. No, Cole said firmly. You started this. Let's finish it. He paused, then continued, his voice steady. I work 16-hour days when I'm on set. I train with real professionals to make sure what audiences see on screen is real. And you want to call that easy? Derek, clearly out of his depth now, tried humor one more time, and it landed flat. Cole, I think you're taking this a little too seriously. My work is my life, Cole said. The people I work with, the stories we tell, that's serious to me. What's not serious is sitting behind a desk taking cheap shots at people who are actually out there building something. For several long seconds, nobody in the studio said anything at all. A stagehand near the wings had frozen mid-step, cable coil still in hand, watching the exchange unfold like everyone else in the building. You know the difference between you and me, Derek? Cole continued, his voice steady and unhurried. When I fail, when a movie doesn't land, real people lose their jobs. Real consequences happen. But you can say whatever you want about whoever you want, and tomorrow night you're right back at that desk, doing it to someone else. Derek reached for his coffee mug, his hand noticeably unsteady. Maybe we should take a quick break, he said. No breaks, Cole said. You wanted to have this conversation live, so let's have it. The audience was fully locked in now. Some visibly uncomfortable, others leaning forward, sensing they were watching something that wasn't going to be edited out, something that was actually unmistakably real. Look, Derek said, his composure cracking further. If I offended you, I'm sorry. That wasn't my intention. Your intention, Cole said quietly, was to make me look small so your audience would laugh. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise. Off camera, producers could be seen exchanging tense, uncertain glances, none of them quite sure whether to signal for a cut or let the moment run. Then Derek, backed into a corner and grasping for some way to regain the upper hand, made the mistake that would define the rest of the night. You think you're better than me? He snapped, his composure finally slipping entirely. Everyone knows about your past, Cole. Everyone knows what you were before all this. The studio went dead silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold still. Cole's expression didn't change much, but something in his eyes went cold. "There it is," he said softly. "When the jokes stop working, go for the personal stuff. That's who you really are." "Yes, you did," Cole said. "You've been sitting on that, waiting for the moment it would land hardest. Well, congratulations. You got it out there. On live television, in front of everyone." Derek looked, for the first time all night, genuinely afraid of what was happening to his own show. "You want to talk about my past?" Cole said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "Fine. Yes, I made mistakes when I was young. Real ones that hurt people. And I spent years owning that. Apologizing. Working to be better. I didn't hide behind a punchline about it." He let that sit for a moment before continuing. "But what you just did, bringing up someone's worst moment to try to win an argument on live TV, that's not 20 years ago. That's who you are right now. Today." Derek's voice cracked as he tried to respond. "Cole, please, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that." "You're sorry you got caught?" Cole said, not unkindly, but without softening it either. "That's different from actually being sorry." Cole reached up and unclipped his microphone, setting it gently on the table between them. "I came here tonight to talk about a film that took 2 years and hundreds of people to make," he said. "And instead, this turned into whatever this was. Those people deserve better than that. So does this audience. Honestly, so do you if you actually thought about it." Derek, visibly shaken, made one final attempt. "Please don't leave like this. We can figure this out. Cut the segment, start over." "There's no starting over," Cole said, standing. "This is what happened. This is what you chose to say, in front of all these people." He straightened his jacket, turned toward the edge of the stage, then paused and looked back one last time. "Next time you want to go after someone's character," he said quietly, "make sure yours can survive the scrutiny too." And with that, he walked off the stage. The studio sat in stunned, total silence. No applause, no laughter, just the low hum of the lights and the quiet click of a closing door somewhere backstage. By the next morning, the clip had already spread everywhere. Entertainment outlets ran the footage frame by frame, dissecting the exact line that had escalated everything. Commentary shows spent full segments debating who bore more responsibility: a host who'd reached for an easy joke that landed badly, or a guest who many felt had every right to push back the way he did. Opinions split sharply and immediately, as they tend to when nobody involved gets the chance to walk anything back. Clips of the exchange were captioned and recaptioned 100 different ways online. Some framed it as a long-overdue reckoning, proof that guests didn't have to sit quietly through being mocked just because the format called it comedy. Others argued Derek had simply misjudged the room on one bad night, the kind of miscalculation that happens sometimes in live television, and that the pile-on afterward was disproportionate to the mistake itself. A few industry veterans pointed out more quietly that the real story wasn't really about either man specifically. It was about how thin the line has always been between a joke that lands and one that doesn't, and how little room live television leaves for correcting course once you've crossed it. What almost no one disputed watching it later was the moment things truly turned, the instant Derek stopped joking and started attacking. Before that line, it had been an uncomfortable, tense exchange. After it, it became something else entirely. Voss Tonight issued a brief statement the next day acknowledging that tonight's interview did not represent the tone we aim for, without addressing the specific comment directly. It did little to slow the story's spread. Ratings for the episode spiked immediately, the kind of attention no producer ever wants, but none of them can fully look away from either. In the weeks that followed, the show's usual guest bookings grew noticeably harder to secure. Publicists who had once treated Voss Tonight as a routine, friendly stop began quietly steering their clients elsewhere, at least for a while. Nothing was said outright. Nothing needed to be. Here's the thing worth sitting with, fictional or not. Most confrontations like this aren't really about who throws the sharper line. They're about what happens the moment someone realizes the joke has stopped being a joke, and whether they have the composure to stop before real damage is done. Derek didn't. In one unguarded, defensive moment, he reached for something he knew would hurt, and once it was out there, no apology could fully undo it. That's the strange math of moments like this. They take a fraction of a second to create, and far longer than that to live down. Cole, for his part, didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply refused to sit quietly while someone tried to diminish everything he'd built. There's a kind of strength in that. Not loud, not showy, just steady and immovable, the kind that doesn't need to escalate to make its point. If there's a single image worth carrying away from this fictional night, it's not the silence in that studio, or the closing door, or even the line that caused it all. It's the quieter moment just before Cole stood up. The pause where he could have let it go, and chose instead to say, plainly and without cruelty, that some things simply aren't acceptable, even when the cameras are rolling and the audience is waiting for a laugh. Because at the end of the day, the sharpest comeback in the room rarely belongs to the person who spoke first. It usually belongs to the one who stayed calm long enough to mean every word. Months later, when asked in a separate interview whether he had any regrets about that night, Cole gave a simple answer. That he didn't enjoy how it happened, that he took no pleasure in watching another person unravel on camera, but that he also couldn't imagine sitting there and letting the comment pass unanswered. Some lines, he said, you either address in the moment or you carry the weight of not having addressed them for a lot longer than 34 seconds. Derek, for his part, largely disappeared from public commentary on the incident. Voss Tonight continued for a while longer, the jokes noticeably softer. The edge that had once defined the show dulled into something more cautious, more careful, less willing to risk the kind of unscripted moment that had cost so much in a single unguarded sentence. Whether that caution came from genuine reflection or simple self-preservation, nobody watching from the outside could really say. Perhaps, in the end, it didn't matter which. The result, either way, was a host who never again reached quite so quickly for the easy laugh at somebody else's expense.